So, let's go. Number 1, hearing is the last thing to go. Here's the thing nobody wants to tell you. When you are dying, when your body has stopped answering, when you can't move and can't speak and can't open your eyes, you might still be listening. For a long time, this was just something hospice nurses believed. They'd tell the family the same thing, over and over. Keep talking. Keep holding the hand. They can still hear you. Nobody could prove it. It just felt true. Then, in 2020, researchers in Vancouver decided to actually check. They wired up dying patients with sensors that read the electrical activity of the brain. First, while the patients were awake. Then again, in their final hours when they had gone completely unresponsive. No reactions. No movement. As close to gone as a person gets while their heart is still going. And the brains were still working. Still catching the sounds in the room. Still picking out patterns in the noise. The dying brain responded almost exactly like the brain of a healthy young person listening to the same thing. Hours from the end. Still tuned in. So the voices in the room are reaching them. The last thing you ever do might not be seeing, or feeling, or thinking. It might be hearing the people you love in a room you can no longer answer. Which raises a worse question. If hearing is the last thing to switch off, what is it like on the inside when it finally does? Number 2, the dying wake up. Imagine someone you love has been gone for years without leaving. Dementia took the person and left the body sitting in the chair. They don't know your name. They haven't known it in a long time. You've made your peace with the quiet. And then, one day, near the very end, they look up. And they're back. They say your name. They talk in full sentences. They remember things nobody thought was still in there. For a few minutes or a few hours, the person you lost is just there again, clear as anything. And then, usually within a day or two, they die. This has a name. Terminal lucidity. A researcher gave it that name back in 2009, but doctors and families have been quietly watching it happen for centuries. It is not as rare as you'd think. The Cleveland Clinic estimates it happens to about 1 in 3 people with end-stage dementia in their final days. In one study, every single family that was asked had seen it happen. Here's the part that should unsettle you. Nobody knows how. The brain in these patients is physically damaged, sometimes severely, sometimes for years. There is no medical reason a mind that gone should be able to switch back on and say goodbye. But it does. And then the light goes out for good. Scientists can't explain the return. They also can't explain why it seems to know exactly when to happen. Number 3, death is not a moment. You think of death as a line. 1 second you're alive, the next second you're not, and there's a clean little border in between with a timestamp on it. That border does not exist. Death is not a moment. It's a shutdown, and it happens in stages. When your heart stops and your breathing stops, that's called clinical death. And here's the strange part. It can be undone. For a few minutes, nothing is permanent yet. The cells are starving, but they haven't crossed over. This is the whole reason CPR exists. You are not restarting a dead person. You are reaching into that gap before it closes. Because different parts of you die at different speeds. Your brain is the greediest thing in your body. Cut off its oxygen, and it starts taking permanent damage in about 3 to 6 minutes. That's it. Shorter than this section of the video, but other tissues hang on far longer, quietly alive, waiting for a blood supply that isn't coming. So there is no single instant where you end. There's a window, a messy, sliding, biological gray zone where you are neither clearly here nor clearly gone. Doctors draw a line through it and write down a time because they have to. But the line is a decision, not a fact. And once you realize science can't cleanly tell you where death even begins, every other thing on this list gets a lot stranger. Number 4, you can die of a broken heart. This one sounds like a greeting card. It is actually a diagnosis, and it can kill you. It's called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, named after a Japanese octopus trap, because that's the shape your heart twists into. Something overwhelming happens to you. You lose your husband of 40 years. You get terrifying news. Your body floods with stress chemicals, and the lower chamber of your heart balloons out into this weird narrow-necked shape and stops pumping properly. It looks exactly like a heart attack. Same crushing chest pain. Same panic. Except your arteries are clear. There's no blockage. There's just grief doing this to muscle. And people think it's harmless because it's emotional. It isn't. Looking at cases across recent years, around 6.5 people out of 100 didn't survive the hospital stay. For men, it was worse, over 11 out of 100, even though the condition hits women far more often. So, the phrase was never really a metaphor. The heart is a physical object. Hurt it badly enough from the inside with nothing but feeling. And it can genuinely quit. Your emotions have a body count. And your heart isn't even the strangest organ on this list. Number 5, your genes wake up after you die. You'd assume that when you die, everything inside you just powers down at once. Lights off, system shut down, silence. The opposite happens. Scientists tracked more than 1,000 genes in animals after death, expecting the activity to fade out like a dimming bulb. Instead, hundreds of genes got louder. More than 1,000 gene readings actually increased after the animal was clinically dead, and they didn't all fire at once. They switched on in waves. Some 30 minutes after death, some a full 2 days later. Think about that. 2 days after the official time of death, parts of you are still turning on for the first time, and the genes that wake up are not random. They're the ones involved in stress and inflammation, in fighting off invaders, and weirdly, some of the same genes a body uses to build an embryo. The machinery of starting life, switching on. Inside something that just ended it. One of the researchers put it perfectly. He said you can learn a lot about life by studying death. It's gotten strange enough that some scientists talk about a kind of third state. Not alive, not fully decayed. Something in between, where the body is technically a corpse, but the cells didn't get the message, which brings us to what those cells decide to do next. Number 6, your body eats itself. The moment your blood stops moving, your body turns on itself. Not in hours, in minutes. It starts with your own cells. While you were alive, every cell kept a set of powerful enzymes locked up tight, because those enzymes exist to break things down. Death lets them loose. They start digesting the cell from the inside out. This is called autolysis, self-digestion, and it kicks off roughly 4 minutes after you die. You are very literally the first thing to eat you. Then your own microbes join in. All those bacteria that spent your whole life helping you digest food and stay alive suddenly have no immune system holding them back in a warm buffet with no waiter. So they spread, they multiply, they switch from keeping you running to taking you apart. And forensic scientists love this because it runs on a schedule. The wave of microbes that colonizes a body comes in a predictable order. They call it the necrobiome, and it ticks along reliably enough that investigators can use it like a clock to figure out how long someone has been dead. Your body's a country, and the second you leave, the population you spent a lifetime feeding decides it's time to redraw the map. And before they've barely started, they announce it to the world. Number 7. Death has a smell. Your brain obeys. There's a specific smell to death. It comes from 2 chemicals with almost 2 perfect names. Putrescine and cadaverine. They're released as bacteria break down the body, and here's what's unsettling. Your brain already knows what they mean, and it knows without asking you. In experiments, scientists expose people to tiny traces of putrescine, amounts so faint that people couldn't consciously place the smell. They didn't think, that's death. They didn't think anything. But their bodies reacted anyway. Alertness spiked. The fight-or-flight system switched on. Reaction times sharpened. People felt a sudden urge to just get away, walk faster, leave, without knowing why. Some of them even got more hostile to strangers. A single whiff of decay, and the ancient part of the brain quietly went to threat mode and started running the survival program. You have a dedicated sensor for this. An olfactory receptor finely tuned to the smell of a corpse. Evolution decided that detecting death was so important it deserved its own hardware, wired straight past your conscious mind. So death doesn't just have a smell, it has a password. and your body answers it before you even know someone knocked. Number 8, not dead until warm and dead. Everything so far has pushed one direction. Death comes, death wins, death is the door that only swings one way. Here's the truth that breaks that pattern. There's a saying in emergency medicine, nobody is dead until they're warm and dead. Because cold changes the rules. When a body gets extremely cold, everything slows down. The brain, which normally dies in minutes without oxygen, can suddenly survive with almost none, because it barely needs any. Deep cold is dangerous, but it's also a kind of preservation. It puts the body on pause. And the records are almost impossible to believe. Doctors have brought people back whose core temperature had dropped to under 14 degrees Celsius. That's more than 20 degrees below where you're supposed to be. In one case, the time from the heart stopping to the heart restarting was nearly 7 hours. 7 hours with no heartbeat, and the person walked out with their brain intact. That's why paramedics won't call it in the field if someone's frozen. You aren't allowed to be declared dead until they've warmed you back up and you're still gone. Because until then, you might just be paused. Sometimes death is negotiable, and sometimes it doesn't even wait for permission to come back. Number 9, the dead who restart themselves. Picture a hospital room. The team has been doing CPR for a long time. Nothing is working. Eventually, a doctor makes the hardest call there is, stops the effort, notes the time, and says the person is gone. Everyone steps back. The room goes quiet. And then the monitor beeps. The heart, all on its own, with nobody touching the patient, starts again. This is real. It's called Lazarus syndrome, and it's exactly as eerie as it sounds. Since the first report in 1982, doctors have documented around 76 cases across 27 different countries. The patients range from a 9-month-old baby to a 97-year-old. In some cases, the heart came back more than 20 minutes after everyone had given up and walked away. Nobody is fully sure why it happens. The leading guess is that pressure builds up in the chest during CPR, and when you finally stop, that pressure releases and lets the heart refill and catch. But it's rare enough and strange enough that it earned a name straight out of a resurrection story. It's also why hospitals now wait and watch for a while after stopping. Because the most confident sentence in medicine, "this person is dead," turned out to have an asterisk. And once you know the moment of death can unhappen, even the stillness afterwards starts to feel like it's counting something. Number 10. Rigor mortis is your last move. You know the image. A body gone stiff, rigid, locked, frozen in place. We treat it like a symbol of death being final. It's actually the exact opposite. Rigor mortis is your muscles making one last move and then getting stuck mid-move. Here's what's really happening. Every time a muscle relaxes, it needs a little burst of fuel called ATP just to let go. Not to clench, to release. When you die, your body stops making that fuel almost immediately. So the muscles that were holding tension have no way to let go. The tiny fibers inside them lock together and stay locked. That's the stiffness. It's not your body tensing up. It's your body unable to relax, forever holding its last position. It follows a schedule too. Starts within a couple hours, peaks around 6 to 8 hours when the body is at its most rigid, and then, somewhere after half a day, it lets go again. Not because the fuel comes back, but because the self-digestion from earlier has started dissolving the very muscle doing the gripping. The stiffness ends because the body underneath it is already coming apart. Investigators read all of it. How stiff you are, how cool you've gotten, where your blood has settled. 3 overlapping clocks, all started by the same event, all pointing back at the moment you stopped. You spend your whole life as the person reading the clock. In the end, you become the clock, still telling time for someone else long after you've stopped keeping it for yourself.